we cut to June waiting in a lobby, and Twello enters, and June is just not thrilled to see him. She's clearly disgusted by him, and he's cordial, but she does not care. And they start walking down this hallway, and they're talking, and it sounds like Fred's getting this break. And they're gonna do June a solid, though, and let her make a statement to an empty room further down in the scene to make her feel better.
You know what it reminded me of in the beginning when they first convene in like that lobby waiting area, and then they go up the flight of stairs to then have her give this statement. It's like when she had to meet with the Swiss. The setup is very similar of she has to now go upstairs. And to me, it just reminded me that she's been through this so many times. Like, this disappointment is not new for her. We're going to see later, like, it's newer for some of these other characters. Then they're, like, Moira and Luke are more surprised and shocked and outraged. Whereas for June, there's anger for sure and disappointment, absolutely. But she's used to it. So it's just something she's seen before. She saw it with the Swiss. They pretty much said straight to her face. And she said back to them, like, look, I get that you don't care about my suffering. There's a bigger thing happening here and you're not going to help me. And she knew that because of her time with the Mexican ambassador, you know? And so she's been repeatedly let down by any political leaders, especially men, but the Mexican ambassador was a woman. And they all have the same excuse of, you know, I'm sorry for your plight, but it's the same thing that Fred said, better and doesn't mean better for everybody. And June's been told that over and over and over again. So it did remind me of that as she goes up there of like, she's just used to it, but she's also kind of this like quiet burning inferno of frustration that even in Canada, in Gilead as elsewhere, it's the same crap.
I totally agree with everything. I'm going to be slightly pedantic, though I don't think that she's used to it. I think that she's understands that it is an inevitability and accepts it as opposed to being used to it, because getting used to it implies that she wouldn't, like, for me, like when I hear that someone's used to something, it's like, oh well, shrug my shoulders, like, you're gonna disappoint me. But with June, there is that, like you said, that rage that's burning inside of her, like when she directly says to Twello, what is it, weak men, they do make the world go around. Like that's the words of someone who is absolutely seething with rage inside. I fucking love it. I love it. And
that was such an incredible line. Oh, God.
What I really appreciate about this, though, is we've complained in the past about Twello and, like, how impersonal he is and how, like, and we finally narrowed it down by saying that's because we feel like he's constantly sticking to this script, which he's sticking to it, like, as they're walking up the stairs and as, like, he's giving these placations to June. And when June looks at him and says, is he everything you hoped for, with all of the snark? And he takes a moment and he, like, looks at her and he evaluates, and he's like, I think here, like, is the first time that we see, like, a slight break in the script, because, like, his face kind of softens a little bit and he says, yes. Like, he's totally candid with her, and I think he, like, recognizes that rage that she has, and he knows well enough that if he did give her the scripted answer, she would snap. So I feel like this is the moment where, like, after the season 9 ending where she is screaming, I will fucking kill you, I think he, like, realizes exactly who he's dealing with June, and honesty is always going to be the best policy with her, because otherwise she will snap on you.
And Twello says, you know, I'm on your side, but this is a betrayal. She can't believe this. Like, she tried the proper route to seek justice. She tried to do it the right way. And look what happened. She doesn't want to deal with this fucking guy anymore. And the only words that he has to say after she is clearly hurt is, thanks for continuing to play. Come again. It's just it's insulting. It's not kind of insulting. It's insulting. And she's left with just this camera guy in this, like, gigantic ass room. Then after that, when she goes outside and she has that like intermittent flashback of, like, looking up and like Serena's chandelier in the ceiling as, like, Fred is raping her, and then you have this huge ass streetcar pull up in front of her, and it's this aerial view, and she looks so small. She's small now. She feels small. She went from being June fucking Osborne, as Moira says later in the episode, to we've done everything that we can, but it's just not going to be good enough. And you're just going to have to fade away. And we're so sorry. Happy healing. Um, June is much more used to direct action. And that has been far more useful to her than this coming to Canada and trying to do it like the legal proper way. And when you're a person who has just put yourself out there like that, exposed yourself all these terrible things that have happened to you in front of the people that have done them to you, and then your legal system turns around and basically just says like, we appreciate your participation, here's your trophy, and then there's absolutely no closure. That sucks. It's awful. And it happens every fucking day in this country, again and again and again.
When she like goes and she looks up, that's definitely like a callback to season 1. In season 1, she goes outside or steps outside of the Waterford's house and looks up and breathes this big deep breath in, and then opens up her eyes the same way that she did here when she was exiting. So I thought that was a nice like visual callback, even though it wasn't a flashback. When that bus goes blasting by and she's small, the final shot of this scene, she's again staring straight ahead into the camera and absolutely seething, which plays into what we were talking about earlier. But I hate to keep bringing it back to the man, but something I forgot to mention with Twello's like, thank you for continuing to participate in the process, and like that coldness that he has. I think that is a defense mechanism of his, which I would imagine is employed often by government officials that find themselves dealing with these incredibly sensitive circumstances. That sterility in your tone is the only defense mechanism that you have for separating and coping with the inhumanity of what you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis and trying to help people cope with. And you can sort of see like this, like, I don't want to call it a grimace, but he did purse his lips a little bit and he like looked frustrated, and like he spat that answer out at her as he was turning away. Like, because I think he wasn't satisfied to give that response either, because he could see the pain that she has. But it's that moment, like the first time I watched it, I was like, what the fuck, Twello? Like, come on. Like, that's the only thing you can offer to this poor woman. But on my subsequent rewatches, I think I felt a bit more compelled to like understand that he understands her anger. He can sense it and see it on her, but she's right. He doesn't have a side. He has to remain as impartial as he can, and this is how he has to do it, by remaining to that, or by sticking to that sterile script. It's got to be the most maddening thing in the world when she wants some sort of response, some sort of like, whether it's a negative emotional response or like a head pat of like, thank you, I know this is hard for you, and like to genuinely mean it, something. So to talk to a brick wall must be like utterly infuriating when you're in that sort of predicament.
I feel like this is one of those times where there must be advocates for this type of stuff, right? And if there's not, holy Jesus Christ, could we fucking get some? Like, I don't feel like Twello is the person that should be delivering sensitive information such as that. Or I at least feel like there should be somebody there to be like, I'm going to translate what this asshole says over here to something that sounds way less cold and sterile to you over here. It's a thing, right? Like refugee advocates. I know there are sexual abuse advocates. There's advocates of all kinds.
If you think about them going like, it just depends what Twello's role is, but I just look at him as FBI at this point. And if you look at him as a detective, like the detective's going to be the one delivering this news to the victim, like from what I understand, you know? Like I am sure there's advocates in general, but I believe that this is him that has to give her this explanation. I just think he understands that there's nothing he can really say to her that's going to help the situation. Like, what jumped out at me when she goes out and looks up like that is, I agree with you, Roxy, that it was a callback to season 1, but it made me feel like crap, because I feel like it was the first time that she's been so utterly helpless since we've seen her. Like, even in Gilead, she's gained more and more agency and power and ability to manipulate and maneuver and find a way to get what she wants. And she says it later, like, it kind of makes her into a cunt. Like, Gilead will do that to you, because that's how she had to learn how to operate to get what she wanted and to get to survive. Like, it's not just about getting what she wanted to live. And in order to do that, this is what she needed to do. And I feel like here she's experiencing a helplessness that, I mean, it's not Tuelo's fault. It just is what it is. Like, he says what he says. It didn't really bother me because I just don't know what else he would say that would be better or help her. There's nothing that he can say other than she's already given a big grand gesture of a testimony, and now she's giving that same testimony again to an empty room. Like, she feels it fizzling out. And so when she goes outside and looks up, I feel like she wanted to find some way to find the peace to move on. Like, she's looking for it. She wants some sort of closure and justice and peace for herself, and she's not getting it from this justice system whatsoever. And when she goes out and takes that breath of fresh air, like, to me, it just reminded me that Fred is going to be walking free. And it just is such a slap in the face every time you think about it, when June is in Canada also walking free, and she's never going to be rid of those memories. She can't even look up at the sky without thinking about the ceiling in the Waterford's home. Like, that's just, it's awful to think of how this is going to plague her. And Fred just gets to wash his hands free and walk down the street as free as she is. It's disgusting. So I get her fury. That's what I took from that callback, was just, she's entirely helpless, and that is going to make the June that we've known for 4 seasons furious. No one likes to feel helpless, but we've seen that June has found a way to get past that, and now she's right back to where she started in terms of not having any ability to control the situation at this point.